Lesson 10-6, solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So we've gone through a couple ways of solving a quadratic equations, whether it's through graphing, through substitution, or through elimination. Another way is with the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula would be ax squared plus bx plus c equaling 0, that's standard form. So using the quadratic formula would be x equaling negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now, in order to do that, to use the formula, you do need to have your equation put into standard form so you can identify your a, your b, and your c. So step one, using the formula, you're going to rewrite the equation. So make sure that it's in standard form, because sometimes it's not. Just make sure it's in standard form first. Then step two, apply the quadratic formula, substituting the values in for your a, b, and c. So example one, we have solve x squared minus 12x equaling negative 11 by using the quadratic formula. So to put it in standard form, I'm going to add 11 to both sides. And now I have x squared minus 12x plus 11 equaling 0. And then I can identify my a. My a here is 1. My b is a negative 12. And my c is a positive 11. So if I were to put this into the formula, the opposite of b would be the opposite of negative 11, or negative 12 would be, so negative 12 plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 12 squared minus 4, our a is 1, our c is 11, divided by 2a, and our a is 1. So the quick way of doing this is putting it into your calculator. So we'll grab our calculator here. And we're going to type it in exactly the way we have here, except for I'll simplify a few things first, but with a TI-83 or even with the 84, I would make sure you use the parentheses properly. Otherwise, you may get an answer or get an error message, but it could be wrong based on how you put it in. So I would recommend first putting parentheses in there, and then I put my B. My B simplified would be 12. So 12, and then I can only do one at a time, so I can't do plus and minus, so I'm going to do plus, and then I'm going to do the square roots, and then b squared, I'm just going to do that in my head, so negative 12 squared is 144, so I'm going to put 144 minus 4 times 1 times 11, and parentheses, and that first set of parentheses is what I'm finding the square root of. Then if I do another set of parentheses, that's taking the whole numerator, because I have to divide the whole numerator by the denominator, which would be 2. And if I hit enter, it tells me that my answer would be 11. So one of my answers here is x can equal 11. That just means that it crosses the x-axis at 11. Now if I want to find what the other one, I hit second, hit enter, and it re-puts everything in here. And all I need to change is this plus sign to a minus sign. And then hit enter, and you can see the answer could be 1 as well. So I have two solutions, x equaling 11 and x equaling 1. Next example, solve this one. I need to subtract 84 on both sides. So now I have x squared minus 5x minus 84 equaling 0. Put this in my calculator. The opposite of negative 5 is 5. Plus or minus square root of 5 squared is 25. Minus 4 times 2, or times my a, which is 1, and my c, which is negative 84. Divide that by 2a, and my a is 1. So now I'll grab my calculator again. Since I already have the format in here, if I hit second, enter again, I can just change the numbers in here. So I'm going to make this 0, 5. I just delete that. So 5 minus the square root of 25 minus 4 times 1 times a negative 81, and parentheses, oh, forgot to put the negative 81, so negative 81, and parentheses, divide everything by 2, and I get a solution of negative 6.84, which something doesn't look right. There was something I did incorrectly in there, so I should have gotten an integer on this one. If I look at what I have in here, I see the mistake. It wasn't negative 81, it should have been negative 84. So if I go back, hit second, enter, go back up here, change this negative 81 to negative 84, then hit enter, you can see I get an answer of negative 7. So x can equal to negative 7. To find the other solution, if there's another solution, hit second, enter, go back up, we'll make this a plus, then hit enter, and we get an answer of 12. So we have two solutions across the x-axis at negative 7 and 12. Next, solve this equation using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to add 70 to both sides. So now I have x squared minus 19x plus 70. So if I put in the formula, negative 19 is 19 plus or minus the square root of negative 19 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 70, divided by 2 times my a, which is 1. Come back to my calculator here. I'm going to hit second, enter, and put everything back in here. So I have 19 plus square roots of 19 squared. Now I always know that's going to be a positive because I'm squaring it. So that's why I'm just putting in 19, even though I know it's negative 19. 19 squared and negative 19 squared is going to give me the same answer. Then I have minus 4 times 1 times 70, end parentheses, divide everything by 2, and I get an answer of 14. So x can equal 14. And to see if there's another answer for this one, which there is, hit second, enter, just change this to a minus sign, and we end up with 5. So x would also equal 5. Example 2, solve these quadratic formula when a is not equal to 1. We're still going to do everything the same thing. Subtract 12 on both sides, put in standard form. So we have 2x squared plus 5x minus 12 equaling 0. Opposite of b, which would be negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared, which is 25, minus 4 times my a, which is 2, times my c, which is negative 12. Divide all that by 2 times a, which is 2. Come back to my calculator, hit second, enter. Change this to negative 5. Keep that minus. This would be 25 squared minus 4 times 2 times a negative 12, and parentheses, and I'm going to divide that by 4. Enter. And we get this decimal here, but I noticed that I put the wrong number in here again. So if I go back up, second enter, I forgot that I did the multiplication already. So it's really 5 squared, which is 25. So let me get rid of this square here. That's what we would have. Enter, and we get negative 4. So just make sure you are putting it in correctly. Otherwise, you can see make a mistake. If the answer doesn't look properly, like the way you think it should be, just double check that you're putting the right numbers in. Now to find the other root, hit second, enter, just changing one part, change that to a plus, and that gives us 1.5. If you put it as a fraction, it would be 3/2. I'm going to put it as a decimal, so a positive 1.5. Next, subtract 16x on both sides, and I'm now left with 4x squared minus 16x minus 84 equaling 0. Grab our calculator. Actually, before we get to grab our calculator, let's write the formula. So it'll be the opposite of negative 16, which is 16 plus or minus the square root of 16 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is negative 84. Divide that by 2a. My a is 4. Now grab our calculator, hit second, enter, and change numbers up here. So this would be 16 plus 16 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 84, end parentheses, and divide that by 8, and we get an answer of 7. So x equals 7 is one of my solutions. Find the other one, hit second, enter, change this to a minus, enter, and we get negative 3. For our two solutions, we have 7 and negative 3. We head to example 3. Word problem formats says the normal blood pressure of an adult woman, P, in millimeters of mercury given her age, T, in years, we modify an equation. P equals 0.01 T squared plus 0.5 T plus 107. If Sanko's blood pressure is 120, how old might she be? So to solve this one, the T is for blood pressure, and we're told what the blood pressure was. So the blood pressure was 120. So I'm going to write the equation. So it'd be 0.01 T squared plus 0.5 T plus 107 equals 120 for the blood pressure. Make this equal to 0. I'm going to subtract 120, and I get 0.01 T squared plus 0.5 T minus 13 equaling 0. And then I'm going to put this into the quadratic formula. So my b, the opposite of b is a negative 0.5 plus or minus square root of 0.5 squared minus 4 times my a, which is 0.01, times my c, which is negative 13. Divide that by 2 times 0.01. Grab our calculator. Second, enter. So we have a negative 0.5 plus the square root of 0.5 squared minus 4 times my a, which is 0.01, times negative 13, end parentheses, divided by, and here I'm going to put parentheses in here because I'm dividing the product of 2 times 0.01. If you don't put it in parentheses, then it's going to just divide everything by 2, and then whatever your answer is, then they're going to multiply by 0.01. So then you would get the incorrect answer. So make sure you put your divisor in parentheses if you have a multiplication problem underneath. Now I hit enter, and roughly this would be 18. If I put it to the nearest tenth, it would have 18.9. So actually equal roughly 18.9. And then finding the other one, hit second, enter, put a minus sign here, hit enter, we get negative 68.9. Since we are finding age of a person, we can't have negative answers. So we know that this would not make, negative 68.9 wouldn't make sense. So the rough estimate of what her age would be about 18.9 years, or if you did it to the nearest year, it would be 19 years old. Next, the bottom of the parabolic curve has a parabolic curve as part of its design. The shape can be modeled by the equation y equals negative 0.0127 x squared plus 189.07, where y is the height of the arc and x is the distance from the center. Use the quadratic formula to solve for x at the height of 100 feet, eliminating any extraneous solutions. Round to the nearest tenth if necessary. Just a reminder, extraneous just means you get a solution, but it doesn't make sense to the problem when you put it back in. So I start with my equation, negative 0.0127 x squared plus 189.07 equals y is the height of the arc, and it says that the height started at a height of 100. Make this equal to 0 by subtracting 100. And we have an equation of negative 0.0127 x squared plus 89.07 equaling 0. So now let's put this into our equation, or our formula. So our b is 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is just 0 squared, minus 4 times a, which is negative 0.0127 times our c, which is 89.07. Divide that by 2 times negative 0.0127. Now I know my denominator is going to be a negative, and up here I need to have whatever my root is, I got to use the negative root. So if I use the negative root, I should get a positive answer. So now let's second enter, let's put the numbers in here. So if I just delete this part, put a 0 in, 0 minus 0 squared minus 4 times, this would be a negative 0.0127 times 89.07 and parentheses divided by parentheses 2 times a negative 0.0127 and parentheses, and I get a solution of 83.7. If I were to find it with a plus sign, so just change this to a plus, you would get a negative 83.7, and a negative 83.7 would not make sense. That would be extraneous. So we don't want to use that one. So the x wouldn't make sense for the distance from the center. You can't have a negative distance. So our answer would be 83.7, and this would be in feet. Next, the quarterbacks on a high school football team want to see who can get the most hang time when throwing the ball. Hunter knows that using his initial velocity and height, he can model the factory of his throw with the equation h equals negative 16t squared plus 35t plus 5.2, where h is the height of the ball in feet and t is the time since the ball was thrown in seconds. After how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? We'll solve the equation by using a quadratic formula, eliminating any extreme solutions. Then round your answer to the nearest term. So we have our equation here, so let's plug those in. So this would be our negative b, which would be negative 95 plus or minus the square root of 95 squared minus 4 times our a, which is negative 16, times our c, which is 5.2. Divide that by 2 times negative 16. And let's get our calculator out. Since our denominator is going to be a negative, I need to make sure I have a negative answer up on top. So we have parentheses negative 95 plus square root of 95 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 5.2 and parentheses divided by 2 parentheses 2 times negative 16 and parentheses, and we would get negative 0.05. So the nearest tenth, that would be negative 0.1. Now we can't have negative answers here, so if I go second enter, see what would it be if I put a positive in here or a minus sign here, then hit enter, we get 5.9. And if we run it 5.99, so if I run it to the nearest tenth, that would give us to roughly 6 seconds. So our solution for this one would be x equaling about 6 seconds. Next, the last part of our lesson is on the discriminant. The discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula inside the quadratic. So the expression under the radical sign b squared minus 4ac would be called the discriminant. You use that to determine how many solutions you can have, real solutions, for the quadratic equation. So to determine that, if the discriminant is negative, that means you would have 0 x-intercepts. So there isn't anything in there. And that means you have no real solution because it never crosses the x-axis. If the discriminant is equal to 0, the square root of 0 is 0, that means you're going to have one solution, one x-intercept. It crosses in one place. It's a double root. It means the vertex is on the x-axis. And then if your discriminant is positive, then you're going to have 2 x-intercepts or 2 real solutions. So just knowing the discriminant will determine should you get a solution or not. So let's practice with a few examples. Let's take the value of the discriminant of 4x squared minus 3x equaling -1. Then determine the number of real solutions of the equation. So the first thing I want to do is put it in standard form. And now I have 4x squared minus 3x plus 1 equaling 0. And then the discriminants, I just need to use the formula b squared minus 4ac. So here's my a, here's my b, here's my c. So my b squared minus 4ac, b is -3, my a is 4, and my c is 1. So that would give us 9 minus 16. 9 minus 16 is a -7. And -7 tells us that there are no solutions, no real solutions. Next, state the value of the discriminant here. So if I add 3 to both sides, I have 3x squared minus 6x plus 3 equaling 0. So here's my A, my B, my C. So my B squared minus 4AC. My B is negative 6. My A is 3. My C is 3. So this gives us 36 minus 9 times 4 is 36. 36 minus 6 is 0. That means I have one real solution. And our final question. State the value of the discriminant and then determine the number of real solutions. So I have 8x squared minus 15x plus 9 equaling 0. So my B squared, so negative 15 minus 4, my A is 8, my C is 9. So negative 15 squared will give us 225 minus 4 times 72 gives us 288. 225 minus 288 gives us a negative 63. Since our answer is negative, we have no real solution. So you can use the symbol, or you can just say no real solution. So that is our lesson on solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula.